Before we dive deep into the tragic, dark, and utterly fascinating story of Aatrox, the Darkened Blade, make sure you get cozy. Find a comfy spot, maybe grab your favorite drink, and settle in for a long journey through the twisted history of one of League of Legends' most iconic and feared warriors. If you enjoy this lore deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any future stories from the world of Runeterra. Now, let's embark on this tale, beginning far before Aatrox was the terror he is today, all the way back to the dawn of the Celestial Order. Chapter 1. Origins of the Darken. Long before the world of Runeterra was shaped into the lands known today, powerful beings ruled the fate of the mortal realms. Among these were the Darken, a mysterious and ancient race of godlike warriors, forged in the fires of war and destruction. Aatrox was one of them, a warrior of unmatched might and ferocity, born from an era where magic and bloodshed intertwined to decide the fate of kingdoms. The Darken were once mortal men, but through a long-forgotten ritual and the infusion of arcane energies, they transcended their humanity. The ritual imbued them with immense power, transforming their flesh into something both immortal and terrible. Their forms were warped by dark magic, their weapons alive with sentient malice. Though once warriors of noble intent, the Darken were ultimately consumed by the very powers they wielded, their souls imprisoned within their living weapons, cursed to eternal torment. Aatrox's origins lie deep within the history of the ancient wars that tore Runeterra apart. He was not merely a man, but a godlike figure, embodying the violence and wrath of battle itself. As a Darken, Aatrox was a living weapon, his blade a part of his very being, forged in arcane fires that gave it the power to sunder mountains and devastate armies. He was feared and revered alike, a force that few could withstand. The exact details of the Darken's creation remain shrouded in mystery, but what is certain is their profound impact on the course of Runeterra's history. When the world was young and the balance of power fragile, the Darken emerged as champions in the great wars that shaped nations. Their strength was unmatched, and their fury insatiable. Aatrox, in particular, was a champion of war's darkest aspects: destruction, rage, and bloodlust. However, their rise was also their downfall. The Darken, intoxicated by their own power and consumed by their rage, grew too dangerous even for their allies. As their corruption spread, the other races of Runeterra united to bring an end to the Darken menace. In a desperate gambit, they devised a way to imprison these mighty warriors by binding their souls to their weapons, sealing their essence in the very blades they wielded. For Aatrox, this curse was a fate worse than death. Bound forever to his sword, Aatrox was trapped between existence and oblivion. Though his physical form was destroyed, his consciousness endured within the weapon, a restless spirit imprisoned in steel. Over centuries, his mind fractured, his memories a chaotic swirl of pain, hatred, and fleeting glimpses of the man he once was. This curse transformed Aatrox from a godlike warrior into a tormented, wandering spirit of vengeance. His blade became a weapon of terror, carving devastation wherever it was wielded. Legends grew around the cursed sword, spoken in fearful whispers by those who survived encounters with the Darken's power. The imprisonment of the Darken was not perfect, however. Though bound, their influence persisted. The weapons containing their souls occasionally resurface throughout history, wielded by those unfortunate or foolhardy enough to claim them. Each time, Aatrox's rage would reignite, his spirit struggling to break free and bring about the end of all things. In this way, Aatrox's story is one of eternal conflict, not just against the world that sought to imprison him, but also within himself. His identity is torn between the remnants of the mortal man he once was and the immortal weapon of destruction he has become. The darkened curse feeds his rage, but also shackles his soul in ceaseless torment. As centuries passed, Aatrox's legend faded into myth. But the whispers never died. Tales told of a dark sword that thirsted for blood, a warrior's spirit trapped within a blade, seeking to bring ruin upon the world once more. The world changed, new powers rose, and civilizations advanced, but the shadow of the Darkin lingered, waiting, biding its time. With the passing of ages, the blade containing Aatrox's essence resurfaced once again in the world of Runeterra. In a time when old evils were believed to be vanquished, Aatrox was awakened, no longer a mere legend, but a force reborn. His memories remained fragmented, but his purpose was clear: to bring war, destruction, and the end of all things. This rebirth marked the beginning of a new chapter, a time when the Darkin would once again challenge the fate of Runeterra. And at the center of this resurgence stood Aatrox, the Darkin blade made flesh, wielding his cursed sword to reshape the world through fire and blood. Chapter 2: The Great War and the Darkin's Fall. The story of Aatrox and his brethren, the Darkin, is inseparable from the greatest and most devastating conflict in Runeterra's history, the Rune Wars. This series of brutal battles reshaped the continent and left scars on the very land itself. It was during this epoch that the Darkin, once mortal warriors elevated by ancient magics, revealed their true nature as godlike but cursed entities, and ultimately suffered a tragic downfall. The Rune Wars were fought long before the present age, in a time when powerful factions vied for control of the mystical runes that governed magic itself. These runes were not mere symbols, but vast sources of raw power, capable of reshaping reality, granting life or death, and unleashing devastating destruction. Kingdoms armed with rune-forged weapons and arcane knowledge clashed in wars that devastated entire regions. Into this maelstrom stepped the Darkin, champions who had transcended mortal limitations, their bodies and souls twisted by forbidden magics. Among them, Aatrox stood out as a paragon of war's deadly artistry, a warrior whose presence inspired both awe and terror. At first, the Darkin fought as heroes. Their powers turned the tide in battles thought lost. They wielded their living weapons with unmatched skill, carving through enemy ranks and devastating armies. But over time, the influence of the corrupting magic they carried began to surface. The Darkin's strength was fed by rage and bloodlust, and with every battle, their humanity faded. Aatrox, once a mortal man with honor and purpose, found himself consumed by a relentless fury that both empowered and cursed him. His sword, a conduit of his soul, hungered for destruction, and through it, he unleashed devastation on a scale that few could comprehend. The very essence of the Darkin was a paradox, beings of immense power who were also prisoners of their own wrath. As the wars dragged on, the devastation wrought by the Darkin grew too great to ignore. The kingdoms and factions of Runeterra, once divided, united against this new threat. The combined might of mortal armies, sorcerers, and ancient orders sought to end the Darken's rampage. It was a desperate and dangerous undertaking. The Darken were not merely mortal enemies, but immortal beings whose souls were bound to their weapons. To kill them outright was impossible. Instead, the victors devised a plan to imprison the Darken, sealing their souls within the very weapons they wielded, trapping their consciousnesses and binding their immortality. This act required great sacrifice and powerful magics. Legendary sorcerers and rune masters collaborated to forge enchanted bindings strong enough to contain the Darken's rage and power. The battlefield where this was achieved became known as the Crucible, a place marked by the echoes of war and the weight of destiny. Aatrox was one of the last Darken to be imprisoned. Despite his fury and power, the combined efforts of the united forces overcame him. His physical form was shattered, but his soul was sealed within his blade, a living prison forged to contain his endless torment. Though bound, the Darken were not destroyed. Their souls simmered in eternal imprisonment, their weapons scattered across Runeterra. Some were lost to history, others remained hidden, waiting for the day they might awaken once more. For centuries, the Darken's influence lingered like a shadow. Tales of cursed weapons and malevolent spirits haunted folklore, warning of the terrible power trapped within steel. Aatrox's blade became a symbol of doom, whispered about in fear and superstition. Yet, the curse of the Darken was cruel and insidious. Imprisoned, but not broken, their souls sought hosts to wield their weapons, mortals who, unknowingly or not, became vessels for the Darken's rage. With each new bearer, the weapon's curse spread, corrupting minds and bodies and driving the wielder toward destruction. Aatrox's blade passed through many hands, each time unleashing a fragment of the warrior's wrath on the world. Wherever the Darken blade appeared, devastation followed. The curse was a slow poison, eroding the sanity and will of those who dared wield it. Despite this, Aatrox's consciousness endured. His mind, fractured by centuries of imprisonment, wrestled with the curse and his fading humanity. Memories of honor and purpose clashed with an overwhelming urge for violence and annihilation. In this liminal state, Aatrox became a tragic figure, a godlike warrior trapped in eternal torment, both victim and executioner. His rage burned hot, but so did his desire to end his own suffering, even if that meant destroying the world that had condemned him. The fall of the Darken was not just a tale of defeat, but of a curse that would echo through the ages. It was a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the price of war waged without mercy. As centuries passed, the world moved on. New powers rose, new threats emerged, and the memory of the Darken faded into legend. But the blade that contained Aatrox's soul endured, waiting silently for the right moment to awaken. When that moment came, it would bring with it the resurgence of a warrior whose name meant destruction, a force that would challenge the fate of Runeterra once more. Chapter 3. The Curse of the Darken Blade. Bound within his blade, Aatrox exists in a realm between life and death, a warrior's soul imprisoned within living steel. This cursed fate defines who he is today, neither fully man nor mere weapon, but a terrifying amalgam of both. To understand Aatrox's torment, one must grasp the nature of the Darken's curse and the tragic transformation that turned a once proud champion into a force of relentless destruction. When the combined forces of Runeterra sealed the darkened souls into their weapons, it was not merely a physical imprisonment, but a spiritual sentence. The Darken were condemned to eternal confinement, trapped in vessels that could only be wielded by mortal hands. Their consciousness became a shadow within the steel, their rage a restless fire burning without end. For Aatrox, this meant a loss of self unlike any other. His identity fractured. Memories of his mortal past clashed violently with the primordial fury that now consumed him. The man who once fought for honor was buried beneath layers of hatred and despair, replaced by a being driven by a singular desire to destroy all in his path and break free from his prison. The blade itself is a living extension of Aatrox's soul. It pulses with dark energy, thirsting for blood and conflict. This sentient weapon can corrupt those who wield it, bending their wills to the Darken's desire. Many who come into contact with the blade find themselves overwhelmed by a violent madness, driven to acts of cruelty and destruction they would never have contemplated before. Legends tell of warriors who, upon taking up the darkened blade, become shadows of themselves, vessels through which Aatrox's rage is unleashed upon the world. The weapon feeds on violence, growing stronger with each battle and death it causes. It is both a curse and a catalyst for ruin. Yet, beneath the surface of this endless fury lies a flicker of the man Aatrox once was. Despite the overwhelming pain and madness, his consciousness struggles to maintain some semblance of reason and memory. This internal battle is a defining aspect of his existence, a constant war within a war. Aatrox's curse is more than imprisonment. It is a transformation that blurs the line between warrior and weapon, self and soul. The darkened blade is not a tool, but a prison, a cage forged from both magic and malice. Every strike it lands is a cry of anguish, every kill a plea for release. The effect of this curse is evident not only in the weapon, but in the dark aura that surrounds Aatrox. Those who face him on the battlefield witness an almost supernatural presence, a force that seems to drain hope and willpower. His movements are fluid yet unnatural, his power amplified by the centuries of rage locked within the blade. Though imprisoned, Aatrox is not helpless. The curse grants him immortality, regenerating his wounds and allowing him to endure conflicts that would fell any mortal man. His strength is legendary, his combat skills honed over centuries of endless battle. But with immortality comes torment. Each resurrection brings renewed pain and the fresh weight of his eternal sentence. The more he fights, the more the Darken's curse twists his mind, pulling him further from his humanity. In his rare moments of clarity, Aatrox is haunted by the memories of what he once was, a warrior who fought for causes, who had honor and purpose beyond destruction. These fleeting glimpses of his past only deepen his anguish, fueling the storm of rage that defines his existence. This paradox is what makes Aatrox one of the most tragic figures in Runeterra's history. A being of immense power and terrible curse, whose very existence is a battlefield for his soul. The curse also influences how Aatrox interacts with the world around him. He is a harbinger of war, drawn to conflict as if by instinct. Wherever strife and bloodshed arise, the darkened blade's power grows, and Aatrox's presence follows. Yet he is also a creature of ruin, indifferent to the causes or consequences of the wars he ignites. To him, the world itself is a prison, a place of suffering that he longs to end, even if that means its destruction. The story of Aatrox's curse is not merely about power, but about loss, despair, and the eternal struggle for redemption or release. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked rage and the price of immortality. In the current age, Aatrox's blade has resurfaced once again, wielded by those who either seek power or fall victim to its dark influence. Each wielder becomes a new chapter in the ongoing saga of the Darken Curse. And as the shadows of war lengthen over Runeterra, Aatrox's hunger grows, a reminder that some ancient evils never truly die. Chapter 4. The Reawakening and the Return to War. Centuries of silence and shadow followed the Darken's imprisonment, with Aatrox's blade lost to time, buried beneath the rubble of fallen kingdoms and forgotten battlegrounds. Yet, the ancient curse that bound him was not so easily extinguished. The echoes of his fury and the hunger for freedom remained, waiting patiently for a moment when the world would once again tremble beneath his wrath. That moment came with the upheaval of Runeterra in the modern era, a world forever changed by new powers, kingdoms, and magical forces. But the scars left by the Rune Wars and the Darken's fall were never fully healed, and their shadows lurked just beneath the surface, ready to resurface with devastating consequences. The key to Aatrox's return lay in his blade, the living prison that housed his shattered soul. Over time, the magic that kept the Darken sealed began to weaken. The centuries wore down the wards, the enchantments frayed like old cloth, and the prison's walls grew porous. More dangerously, the blade fell into the hands of mortals unaware of the terrible power they now possessed. The Darken Curse, patient as a spider waiting for prey, seized this opportunity. Aatrox's consciousness stirred, reaching out from the depths of the weapon, slowly corrupting and consuming the mind of its new wielder. This process was agonizing and brutal, as the host's will clashed with the Darken's overwhelming hunger for blood and freedom. Eventually, Aatrox emerged once more, not as a man nor as a mere weapon, but as a living nightmare forged in hatred and war. His form was monstrous, a towering figure of dark steel and shadow, wielding his great sword with terrifying grace. His eyes burned with an unholy fire, reflecting the endless torment of a soul trapped in eternal conflict. The world was not prepared for his resurgence. Where Aatrox walked, destruction followed. Entire armies crumbled beneath his blows, and cities trembled under the weight of his wrath. Yet his rage was not aimless. Aatrox sought to ignite another war, not for conquest or glory, but to shatter the bonds that kept him chained, and to unleash the full fury of the Darken upon Runeterra. Despite his monstrous form, echoes of Aatrox's old self remained, a warrior bound by an unbreakable code of war. He sought worthy opponents, those who could match his strength and provide an outlet for his endless rage. For Aatrox, combat was not merely destruction. It was a release, a fleeting taste of freedom in a cursed existence. This hunger for battle brought him into conflict with many champions of the modern era. Some, like Riven, found their own tortured pasts echoed in his rage. Others, such as Kael and Morgana, perceived him as a scourge that threatened the fragile balance between order and chaos. The clash between Aatrox and these champions was more than a fight for survival. It was a collision of ideals, destinies, and ancient curses. Each battle left scars on the world and on Aatrox's fragmented soul, deepening the tragic complexity of his existence. In the shadows of this new war, the remnants of the ancient orders that once fought the Darkin began to stir once more. Scholars and warriors alike sought to understand Aatrox's nature and find ways to contain or destroy him, hoping to prevent a repeat of the devastation the Darkin once wrought. But the key to defeating Aatrox lay not only in brute strength or magic, but in understanding the curse that bound him. To challenge the Darkin meant confronting the legacy of war, rage, and loss that shaped his being. It was a task as dangerous as it was necessary. As Aatrox carved a path of destruction across Runeterra, his name became a symbol of fear and inevitability, a reminder that some ancient evils are never truly vanquished. His return forced the world to face a grim truth. The price of war is eternal, and some battles never end. The reawakening of Aatrox marked a turning point in Runeterra's history. The ancient warrior, cursed and broken, now sought to remake the world through fire and blood, a world where his torment might finally end, even if it meant consuming everything in the process. Chapter 5. The Darkin Among Legends, Allies, Foes, and the Endless War. The world had changed since Aatrox first walked its lands, but the echoes of his fury and the weight of his curse remained, haunting Runeterra like a storm on the horizon. Now, awakened and unleashed once more, the Darkin's presence rippled through the lives of many champions, heroes and villains alike, each drawn into the dark shadow he cast. Aatrox was no mere monster or mindless brute. Beneath the armor of living steel and the burning fire in his eyes lay the mind of a battle-hardened warrior, shaped by centuries of war and betrayal. Though twisted by his curse, the warrior's code still lingered within him, a relentless drive to seek worthy foes and unleash his rage in combat. It was this unyielding spirit that drew him into conflict with Riven, a broken soldier haunted by her own past. Riven had once served the Noxian Empire with unwavering loyalty, but betrayal and loss had shattered her world. She carried the weight of her failures like a wound that refused to heal. When she crossed paths with Aatrox, it was as if two fractured souls met in the chaos of battle. Their fights were more than mere clashes of swords. They were conversations of pain, rage, and broken honor. Riven sought redemption, a chance to mend the fractures within herself and the world. Aatrox, on the other hand, embraced the destruction that bound him, believing only in the endless cycle of war to free him from his torment. In each strike, there was a question posed, a challenge laid bare. Could either truly escape their fate, or were they doomed to be prisoners of their pasts forever? The Celestial Sisters, Kayle and Morgana, stood as living symbols of order and chaos, a duality that resonated deeply with Aatrox's story. Kayle, the fiery enforcer of justice, saw the Darkin as a living nightmare that threatened the balance she had sworn to protect. Morgana, her fallen sister, understood the pain of curses and the complexity of light and shadow. Yet she too knew the devastation Aatrox could unleash if left unchecked. When the Darkin faced the sisters, it was a battle not just of strength, but of ideals. Kaylee wielded righteous fury, a beacon against the darkness, while Morgana fought to protect those cast into shadow. Aatrox embodied the raw force of destruction that could tear their world apart, a reminder that the forces of chaos were never fully vanquished. Yet, Aatrox was not alone in his cursed fate. The Darken were many, scattered remnants of an ancient age, each bound to living weapons that bore their tormented souls. Rast, the bloodthirsty shadow within Cain's scythe. Varus, consumed by vengeance, and others who carried the same dark burden. Though kin by origin, their relationships were strained, rivalries fueled by millennia of betrayal and conflicting desires. Among these fractured brothers in darkness, Aatrox was a force of relentless rage and tragic nobility. His thirst for war clashed with Rayast's chaotic bloodlust and Varus's vengeful torment, painting a complex portrait of power twisted by fate. In the modern age, the League of Legends became a stage where these ancient conflicts played out anew. Summoned to the fields of justice, Aatrox found himself among champions of every origin, each fighting for their own reasons. Some for glory, others for redemption, and some simply to survive. For Aatrox, the League was both prison and arena. Here, his endless hunger for battle could be sated against worthy opponents, while the world could contain the destruction he brought. Each fight was a release, a fleeting moment where the cursed warrior could forget his torment, even if only for a while. But beyond the clash of steel, his presence forced those around him to confront darker truths. The curse that bound him was a warning. Some evils could not be destroyed, only delayed. The cost of power in war was eternal, and the scars they left ran deep, shaping destinies and twisting souls. Through his battles and rivalries, Aatrox's story became entwined with the fates of many champions, their lives a tapestry woven with threads of pain, honor, and inevitable conflict. He was no simple villain, but a living legend of tragedy, a reminder that the greatest warriors are often those who suffer the most. And so, as long as the League endures, the shadow of Aatrox will linger, a dark song of war and sorrow that echoes through every battlefield, whispering that some wars never truly end. Chapter 6. The Blade of War, Aatrox's Power, and the Living Weapon. If Aatrox's story is one of tragedy and endless conflict, then his very form is a living testament to war itself. Bound within his colossal blade and armor is a soul twisted by ancient magics, and bound to a weapon of devastating power, a weapon that is more than steel. It is a fragment of the Darken's cursed existence. To understand Aatrox is to understand the deadly symbiosis between warrior and weapon, the eternal struggle between flesh and metal that fuels his rage and defines his every action. This fusion shapes not only how he fights, but who he is, an unstoppable force of destruction, forged from pain, betrayal, and an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. The blade Aatrox wields is no ordinary weapon. It is a relic of the ancient war against the void, a shard of darkened power that pulses with dark energy and hunger. When Aatrox takes up his sword, it's as if the very essence of war flows through his veins, igniting a storm of fury and strength. His weapon is not just a tool, it is a part of his being, a physical manifestation of his cursed soul. This connection grants Aatrox abilities beyond those of any mortal soldier. His strikes are brutal and overwhelming, capable of tearing through armor and flesh alike. With each swing, he cleaves through enemies as if they were nothing more than shadows in his path. Yet beneath this raw power lies a tragic price. The curse that binds him to his weapon also chains him to eternal torment. The darkened blade hungers for blood, demanding destruction and chaos to feed its insatiable appetite. Aatrox's will is constantly at war with this dark force, struggling to control it while being consumed by its power. His powers manifest in terrifying ways. The ability to heal from wounds that would fell any other warrior, fueled by the life force stolen from his foes. The strength to rend the ground itself, sending shock waves that scatter his enemies. And when driven to the brink, Aatrox can unleash his ultimate form, a monstrous incarnation of war made flesh, where his blade becomes an extension of his rage, unstoppable and devastating. But Aatrox's fighting style is more than sheer brutality. He is a tactician born of countless battles, moving with a deadly grace that belies his monstrous appearance. Each strike is precise, each charge calculated to break the enemy's spirit before their bodies follow. In battle, he is a whirlwind of destruction, a force that dominates through fear and overwhelming power. His presence alone sows terror, his name whispered in dread by those who have seen him rage across the fields. Yet for all his might, Aatrox remains a prisoner of his curse. His blade is both his weapon and his shackle. The more blood he spills, the stronger the weapon's hunger grows, binding him tighter to a cycle of violence from which there is no escape. This tragic irony fuels the depth of his character, a warrior desperate for release, using his immense power to fight a battle that is as much within himself as it is against the world. Each victory is a fleeting reprieve, each wound a reminder of the curse he cannot break. Through his powers and his endless battles, Aatrox embodies the brutal truth of war. It consumes everything, even the strongest souls, and leaves behind scars that never truly heal. His story is not just one of destruction, but of a cursed existence, where power and pain are forever intertwined. As the blade of war, Aatrox stands as a living legend, a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not for glory or conquest, but for the hope of redemption from a fate that seems written in blood. Chapter 7. The Unending Curse. Struggles for freedom and the price of power. Beneath the roaring battlefield in the clash of steel lies the true heart of Aatrox's tragedy, a curse older than any living memory, binding him in chains forged from his own suffering. This curse is not merely a punishment, but a relentless torment that twists his mind and body, driving him to endless war. Long ago, before the days of Runeterra's current kingdoms and empires, the Darkin were proud warriors and conquerors, wielding magic and strength that shaped the course of history. But their power came at a terrible cost. The war against the Void and other ancient evils turned into a nightmare of betrayal and madness. The Darkin were defeated, and their souls were trapped inside their own weapons, cursed to live on as weapons of destruction rather than beings of flesh and blood. Aatrox, once a mighty general and noble warrior, was shackled by this fate. His soul trapped within a monstrous blade, his body twisted and reshaped, forced to become a living weapon of war. The curse corrupted his sense of self, filling him with rage, sorrow, and a burning desire to break free. But the curse was more than a simple imprisonment. It fed on him, consuming his humanity piece by piece, whispering lies and filling him with fury. Every battle, every drop of blood spilled, deepened the bond between warrior and weapon, making escape seem impossible. Yet somewhere beneath the rage, Aatrox's mind still fought. He remembered who he once was, a leader who believed in honor, in fighting for a cause greater than himself. This memory was a double-edged sword, a source of strength and pain. It drove him to seek freedom, to reclaim his lost self, but it also reminded him of the depths to which he had fallen. The curse twisted his very existence into a paradox. To survive, he must fight, but fighting only tightens the chains that bind him. Each victory feeds the weapon's hunger but leaves his soul more fragmented. Each defeat is a reminder of his powerlessness. This endless cycle of war and suffering became Aatrox's defining torment, a struggle not just against his enemies, but against himself. He became both predator and prisoner, a living embodiment of the cost of power and the price of freedom. In his darkest moments, Aatrox questioned whether redemption was even possible. Was there a path beyond the endless bloodshed? Could the curse be broken, or was he doomed to rage forever, a slave to his own weapon? His hatred for the gods and ancient powers that condemned him only deepened his fury. To Aatrox, their cruelty was unforgivable, a cosmic injustice that fueled his wrath and determination. He swore that if freedom was impossible, then the world itself would pay for his chains. This curse also shaped Aatrox's relationships with others, wary and distant, often violent. He trusted few, knowing that his presence brought destruction and pain. Allies were temporary, enemies were countless, and friends were scars in his memory. Yet, despite the darkness, there remained a flicker of hope. Somewhere, buried beneath the layers of rage and blood, was the warrior who dreamed of peace, of an end to the curse and the wars that defined him. That hope was fragile, but it was enough to keep Aatrox fighting, not just against his foes, but against the darkness within. His story is a testament to the tragic cost of power and the enduring struggle for freedom, a tale where victory and defeat are measured not only in battles won, but in the soul's fight to survive. Chapter 8. The Waking War. Aatrox's return to Runeterra. After centuries of silence, hidden away from the world in forgotten tombs and broken battlefields, Aatrox's story was far from over. His reawakening marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for himself, but for Runeterra itself. The blade that once carved out empires would soon be wielded again, bringing ruin and chaos wherever its shadow fell. The dark magic that imprisoned Aatrox was tied not only to his form, but to the very fabric of the world around him. Over the centuries, the lands changed. Kingdoms rose and fell, and old powers faded into legend. But deep beneath the surface, the curse simmered like a wound that never healed. The weapon and its bearer were waiting, biding their time, until the right moment came to shatter the silence. That moment arrived in the form of war, chaos, and conflict, conditions that breathed life back into the ancient Darken. As blood was spilled and battles raged, Aatrox's essence stirred. The souls bound within the darkened weapons began to whisper, calling to one another in the darkness, seeking to reclaim what was lost. When Aatrox finally awoke, the world was unfamiliar, yet ripe for destruction. his senses flooded with the cries of battle and the scent of blood, reigniting the primal fury that had defined him for so long. Yet this new age was different. The kingdoms and champions of Runeterra were unlike those he had known in his past life. The land was fractured, and old alliances had broken, leaving gaps that Aatrox could exploit. His return was not merely a resurgence of brute strength, but a calculated resurgence of terror. With every step he took, devastation followed. Entire armies scattered, fortresses crumbled, and the echoes of his name spread fear across the continent. But Aatrox's mind was sharper now, tempered by the knowledge and regret of centuries lost. He sought more than just destruction. He sought to reclaim his lost identity and shatter the curse that bound him. Every battle was a step toward that elusive freedom. Every opponent a piece in the larger game he played against fate itself. But this new awakening did not go unnoticed. Other forces in Runeterra, mages, warriors, and ancient beings, sensed the rising threat of the Darkin. They knew that Aatrox was more than a mere warlord. He was a harbinger of chaos, whose fury could unravel the fragile peace they had fought so hard to build. Among those who rose to oppose him were champions bound by honor, magic, and duty. Some sought to end the Darkin's curse forever, while others feared what Aatrox's rage would bring to their homes and lives. Battles erupted across the land as the old darkness clashed with new hope, and the world itself became a battleground for souls. Aatrox, however, was not just a force of destruction. He was a symbol of the unending war between power and freedom, rage and redemption. His return awakened old fears and new conflicts, reminding all of Runeterra that some legends refuse to die quietly. His story, once thought buried in the dust of forgotten wars, was now being written anew, one brutal clash at a time. Chapter 9. The Clash of Champions. Aatrox in the Age of Runeterra's Heroes. With his awakening, Aatrox's shadow stretched far and wide, drawing the attention of Runeterra's greatest champions. The world had changed since the days of ancient wars. New heroes had risen, each bearing their own ideals and destinies. Yet, the arrival of the Darkin warlord was a brutal reminder that the past's darkness was never truly gone. Aatrox was more than just a relic of forgotten times. He was a living nightmare, born from betrayal and bloodshed. His presence unsettled the very balance of power among Runeterra's factions. The League of Legends, formed to maintain peace and prevent catastrophic wars, found itself faced with a threat unlike any it had seen before. Champions from all corners of the world answered the call to confront the terror of the Darkin. Some saw Aatrox as a menace to be destroyed, a force that endangered the lives of countless innocents. Others were intrigued by the mystery surrounding him. A warrior bound by curse, driven by rage, yet harboring a tragic longing for freedom. Among these champions, some faced Aatrox directly on the battlefield. Their clashes were fierce, brutal, and often devastating. With his immense strength and dark magic, Aatrox could overpower many. Yet his opponents were cunning and resolute. The fights were more than mere battles. They were struggles for the fate of Runeterra's future. In these confrontations, Aatrox's tragic nature revealed itself. Though a harbinger of destruction, he was not a mindless beast. He spoke with grim determination, his voice echoing with centuries of pain and fury. He warned of the endless cycle of war that cursed him, pleading, sometimes, against the path he was forced to walk. For some champions, this was a call to deeper understanding. Could there be redemption for a being so entwined with darkness? Was Aatrox merely a victim of his own power? Or something more sinister? These questions haunted many as they fought, knowing that the outcome could shape the destiny of the entire world. As battles raged, alliances shifted and strategies evolved. The League worked to contain the threat, seeking to understand the source of Aatrox's strength and the nature of the Darken Curse. Scholars delved into ancient texts, trying to uncover ways to sever the bonds imprisoning the darkened souls. Meanwhile, Aatrox's fury continued to grow, fueled by the pain of his existence and the blood spilled in his name. Each battle etched new scars on his body and soul, but also brought him closer to the edge of madness or salvation. The clash between Aatrox and Runeterra's champions became a legend told across the land, a story of war, sacrifice, and the desperate struggle between light and shadow. His name became synonymous with terror, yet also with the haunting question of whether even the darkest souls could seek the dawn. Through it all, Aatrox remained a force of nature, unstoppable, tragic, and ever fighting against the fate imposed upon him. The story of this living weapon was far from over. It was a saga written in blood and fire, where every fight was a step toward an uncertain destiny.